The ballroom inside the Beverly Hills hotel glittered like something out of a dream. Crystal chandeliers poured golden light over hundreds of guests. Roses lined the walls. The orchestra hummed softly as laughter floated across the room. It was meant to be a quiet celebration, a small private gathering for Michael Jackson, surrounded by friends, assistants, musicians, and a few carefully selected fans. Michael stood near the center of the room, dressed in a soft black jacket and pearl-white shirt, greeting guests with his familiar, gentle smile. He looked peaceful. No one in the room could imagine that in less than 5 minutes, everything would change. The gift arrived just after 9:40 p.m. A hotel attendant wheeled in a medium-sized box wrapped in silver paper and tied with a blue ribbon. Attached to the bow was a simple white card. For Michael with admiration. No name. Michael paused. He had received thousands of gifts in his life, from world leaders, children, artists, fans, strangers. But something about this one made his chest tighten for reasons he could not explain. Another one? Frank Cascio joked lightly. Michael smiled. They're always so kind. He walked over and knelt beside the box. The room grew quieter. Guests leaned in, curious. Michael untied the ribbon slowly. He lifted the lid. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Inside the box sat a smaller wooden case, carefully polished, with gold hinges and a velvet lining visible through the crack. It looked old, elegant, like something belonging in a museum. Michael reached out and opened the case. A flash of white light exploded outward. Bang! The sound tore through the ballroom like thunder. Guests screamed. The chandeliers shook. Michael was thrown backward. Smoke flooded the air. For a horrifying second, no one could see him. Then someone shouted, "Michael!" He lay on the floor, the wooden case shattered beside him, smoke curling around his body. His hands were pressed against his chest. His face was pale. Security rushed in from every direction. "Get a doctor! Call an ambulance! Clear the room!" The orchestra had fallen silent. The celebration had become chaos. Michael's ears rang violently. The world spun. His heart pounded against his ribs, as if trying to escape his chest. The explosion had not been large enough to collapse the room, but was powerful enough to leave him disoriented, dizzy, terrified. "Michael, talk to me," Frank said, kneeling beside him. I'm here," Michael whispered. He tried to sit up. Pain rippled through his shoulder. His hands were trembling. His chest felt tight, as if the air itself had grown heavier. Security agents lifted him carefully. Michael's eyes moved to the shattered box. That gift had not been a gift at all. It had been a message, and someone had intended him to open it. As hotel staff sealed the room and guests were evacuated, Michael was escorted through a back corridor. His heart had still not slowed. His breathing was shallow. An ambulance waited at the loading entrance. Inside the ambulance, the paramedic checked his vitals. "Mr. Jackson, can you tell me what you feel?" "My chest is heavy," Michael said softly, "and my head is spinning." "You lost balance for a moment. Do you remember the blast clearly?" "Yes," he whispered. It was bright, so loud. The paramedic exchanged a glance with the driver. "You're going to the hospital." As the doors closed, Michael stared at the ceiling of the ambulance. The flashing red lights outside washed over him again and again. His mind raced. Someone had planned this. Someone had wanted him hurt, or worse. The ambulance sped through the city. At Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, doctors rushed him into a private trauma room. X-rays were taken. His heart rhythm was monitored. A mild concussion was confirmed. His shoulder was bruised. His ears rang from temporary acoustic trauma. Physically, he would recover, but inside, something had cracked. At 11:12 p.m., a police detective entered the room. "Mr. Jackson," the detective said calmly, "we believe the device inside the gift was designed to frighten, possibly injure, but not kill. However, this was still a criminal act. We are opening a full investigation." Michael closed his eyes. "So someone wanted to scare me?" "Yes." "Or send a message?" The detective hesitated. Possibly both. After the officers left, the room grew quiet. Michael lay alone with the machines humming beside him. He thought of the thousands of strangers who had written him letters over the years, some loving, some desperate, some unstable, some threatening. He thought of how many people knew where he would be tonight. How many eyes were always on him. For the first time in years, he felt truly vulnerable, not because of the explosion, but because of what it represented. Someone out there had crossed the line, and this was only the beginning. Michael whispered into the empty room, barely audible. I just wanted a peaceful night. Outside the hospital, reporters were already gathering. Inside, the doctors continued their quiet watch. And somewhere in the city, the person who had sent the gift waited to see what would happen next. The hospital room was too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes your own breathing feel loud, like the world is holding its breath with you. Michael lay on the narrow bed, the thin blanket pulled up to his chest, the steady beep of the heart monitor keeping time in the darkness. His ears still rang, a soft, high-pitched echo that refused to fade, like a reminder of the moment everything had exploded into chaos. A nurse slipped in silently, adjusted the four, and gave him a small, reassuring smile. "You're stable," she whispered. "Try to rest." Michael nodded, but rest felt impossible. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the flash again, the burst of light, the shuddering boom, the faces of the guests as joy turned into fear in a single breath. He opened his eyes quickly, staring at the pale ceiling. This wasn't supposed to happen. He had wanted a simple evening, a few laughs, some music, a sense of normalcy he rarely allowed himself. Instead, he had been reminded, violently, of how fragile everything was. A soft knock came at the door. "Michael?" It was Frank. Michael turned his head. "Come in." Frank stepped inside slowly, carrying 2 paper cups of tea. He placed one on the table beside the bed. "Chamomile," he said. "Thought you might want something warm." "Thank you." Frank hesitated, then pulled a chair closer. "The police are still downstairs. They're questioning staff, checking security footage." Michael's fingers tightened on the blanket. "Did anyone get hurt?" "Just you," Frank said gently. "And you're going to be okay." Michael nodded, but the words didn't quite reach him. Frank studied him for a moment. "You scared everyone tonight." Michael looked away. "I scare myself." The door opened again, and this time it was Dr. Klein, the attending physician. He checked the chart, listened to Michael's heart, shone a small light in his eyes. "Concussion is mild," the doctor said. "You're lucky, very lucky. You'll stay overnight for observation. No visitors after midnight." Michael swallowed. "Doctor, what if it was worse than they think?" The doctor met his gaze calmly. "It wasn't, and you're safe here." "Safe." The word felt thin. After the doctor left, Frank remained silent company in the dim room. Outside the window, Los Angeles shimmered, unaware of the storm that had just swept through Michael's life. Why would someone do this? Michael whispered. Frank didn't answer right away. Some people want attention. Some want to feel powerful. Some are just angry at the world. Michael's voice was small. "I've given my whole life to making people happy. I know. Sometimes I feel like it's never enough." Frank leaned forward. "It's more than enough. You just can't control what lives inside other people." Michael closed his eyes. The image of the box returned. Silver wrapping, blue ribbon, innocent-looking card. With admiration, he thought of the children who sent him drawings, of the mothers who wrote letters about how his music had saved them, of the hospital rooms he'd visited, the hands he'd held, the promises he'd whispered to strangers who felt like family for a few minutes in time. And then this. The room felt suddenly very cold. Frank stood. "I'll let you rest. Security's outside the door." As Frank left, the silence returned, heavier now. Michael listened to the machines, to his own heartbeat, to the echo of the night still vibrating inside his bones. He thought of his mother, of his children, of the world that always watched him from a distance, never quite seeing how alone he felt in moments like this. Tears slid silently down his cheeks. He wiped them quickly, embarrassed even though no one could see. I'm still here, he whispered to himself. I'm still here. Hours passed. Sometime after midnight, he dozed lightly, slipping in and out of uneasy sleep. In one dream, he was back on stage, the lights blinding, the crowd roaring. In another, he was a child again, standing in the hallway of the old house in Gary, listening to distant music and laughter he wasn't sure he was allowed to join. He woke suddenly when someone touched his hand. He opened his eyes. A woman stood beside the bed. Catherine. Mom, he breathed. She sat carefully on the edge of the bed, her face pale with worry. She smoothed his hair back like she had done 1,000 times before. They called me, she said softly. I came as soon as I could. He squeezed her hand. I'm sorry. For what? For frightening you. She shook her head. You don't get to apologize for what someone else did. Her voice cracked. He saw the fear she was trying to hide, the same fear he had carried inside himself for years. They said you were brave, she whispered. Michael gave a weak smile. I didn't feel brave. Bravery doesn't mean you're not afraid, Catherine said. It means you're still standing. He swallowed. What if next time it's worse? She leaned down, pressing her forehead gently against his. Then we face it together, like we always have. He closed his eyes. The weight in his chest eased just a little. Later, after Catherine left and the room returned to quiet, Michael stared at the small clock on the wall. 2:47 a.m. Somewhere in the city, the person who had sent the gift was likely watching the news, waiting for headlines, waiting to see if fear had done its job. Michael slowly lifted his hand to his chest. Fear would not be the last word. He had survived too much, lost too much, loved too deeply. This moment would not define him, but it would change him. Because for the first time, Michael understood something with painful clarity. The danger he faced wasn't only on the stage. It followed him everywhere. And whatever came next, he would have to be ready. Morning arrived quietly. Sunlight slipped through the thin hospital curtains, painting the walls in soft gold. Michael lay awake, watching dust drift in the beam of light, each tiny particle floating as if the night had never happened. But his body knew better. His head throbbed, his muscles ached, and his mind refused to be still. A nurse entered with a clipboard. Good morning, Michael. How are you feeling? Like I ran a marathon in my sleep, he said with a tired smile. She checked his vitals, adjusted the 4, and nodded. The doctor will be in soon. If everything looks good, you may go home this afternoon. Home. The word felt strange now. When she left, Michael turned his face toward the window. Outside, the city moved as always, cars, people, life. Unaware of the fear that passed through him, he wondered how many people knew, how many headlines would come, how many would speculate, argue, twist the story into something unrecognizable. He closed his eyes. A soft knock came. Frank stepped in, holding a folded newspaper and a paper bag. Brought you some breakfast. And this. Michael glanced at the newspaper, but didn't reach for it. What does it say? Frank hesitated. They're calling it an incident. No details. Just that you're recovering. Michael nodded. Good. Frank placed the bag on the table. Toast, fruit, tea. Michael took the tea, warming his hands around the cup. Any news from security? Frank leaned against the wall. They traced the gift, dropped off by courier. Fake return address. Whoever sent it knew what they were doing. Michael stared at the steam rising from the cup. So they're out there. Yes. Silence stretched between them. Michael finally said, I don't want to cancel the children's visit tomorrow. Frank's eyebrows rose. Michael, after what happened? They're sick, Michael replied softly. Some of them are dying. I won't let fear steal that from them. Frank searched his face. You're sure? Michael nodded. More than anything. Later that morning, Dr. Klein returned with a chart and a concerned expression. You're improving. No neurological damage. You're clear to go home, with strict instructions. Rest. No rehearsals. No stress. Michael gave a small laugh. You're asking the impossible. The doctor's voice softened. I'm asking you to live. By noon, Michael was dressed, moving carefully, his steps slow but steady. Security escorted him through a back entrance to avoid reporters. The ride home felt longer than usual. Every passing car made his shoulders tighten. Every shadow felt heavy. At the gates of his home, he paused before going inside. Frank noticed. "You okay?" Michael took a breath. "I just need a minute." He closed his eyes. The explosion, the noise, the fear, the hospital, his mother's face. Then he opened them again and walked inside. That evening, Michael sat alone in the living room, the house too quiet. The piano waited in the corner, untouched. He stood slowly across the room and rested his fingers on the keys. A simple melody emerged, fragile, hesitant, then warm. Music had always been the place he returned when words failed. Hours passed unnoticed. Near midnight, he stopped playing and stared at his reflection in the darkened window. His face looked older, thinner, tired. "Is this how it ends?" he whispered. "Always running from the next shadow?" He shook his head. No. The next morning, he kept his promise. At the hospital's children's wing, the room was filled with soft laughter, for poles, stuffed animals, brave little faces. When Michael entered, the energy changed instantly. "Michael," one boy whispered. "Is that really him?" Another girl asked, eyes wide. Michael knelt beside a small bed where a child with pale skin and huge eyes clutched a worn teddy bear. "Hello," he said gently. "I heard you were the bravest person here." The girl smiled shyly. They talked. He sang softly. He listened to stories of superheroes, pets, favorite songs. No cameras, no noise, just presence. When it was time to leave, a little boy tugged his sleeve. "Are you scared?" Michael paused. "Sometimes." "Me too," the boy said. Michael squeezed his hand. "But we don't let fear decide who we are." The boy nodded, serious. As Michael walked away, he felt something shift inside him. He had nearly lost his life. And yet, here he was, helping others hold on to theirs. That night, alone again, Michael stood on the balcony, watching the city lights. The future still frightened him. The danger was real, but so was his purpose. He wasn't here just to survive. He was here to matter. And whatever tomorrow held, he would meet it standing. The following days passed under a strange, heavy quiet. Michael stayed inside the house, obeying the doctor's orders more than he liked to admit. Curtains remained half-drawn. Security doubled. Phones rang constantly, though he answered only a few. The world outside kept turning, but inside his walls, time felt suspended, as if everything were waiting for the next breath. He woke before dawn each morning, not from pain, but from dreams. In them, the explosion returned, louder, closer, endless. He would reach for the box, hear the roar, feel the air tear, then wake with his heart racing, the echo still ringing in his ears. One morning, he found himself in the kitchen at 4 a.m., staring at a glass of water, unable to remember how long he had been standing there. "You're pushing too hard," Frank said quietly from the doorway. Michael didn't turn. "I'm standing still." "That's what I mean." They sat together at the table, the world outside barely awake. Birds called somewhere in the trees. Frank folded his hands. "They still haven't found who sent it." Michael nodded. "There are rumors," Frank continued. "People think it was a fan, or someone unstable, or someone trying to scare you, or worse." Michael finally looked at him. "And you?" Frank hesitated. "I think someone wanted your attention." Michael exhaled slowly. "They got it." That afternoon, Catherine called. Her voice, gentle but firm, carried through the line. "Michael, you can't keep everything inside." "I'm fine, Mama." "No," she said. "You're hurting." He closed his eyes. "I don't want to frighten anyone." "You don't frighten me," she replied. "You're my son." The words loosened something in his chest. Later, he walked to the halls of the house, stopping at the door of his studio. The space was dark, silent. He hesitated, then entered. Dust floated in the beam of light from a high window. He turned on the lamp. The familiar smell of wood, cables, paper, and memory surrounded him. He sat at the piano. At first, nothing came. Then a single note. Another. The melody grew slowly, fragile as glass, heavy with everything he hadn't said. His fingers trembled, but he didn't stop. He played until his chest ached and his eyes blurred. This was how he spoke now. 2 days later, he received a letter. No return address. Just his name, written in uneven ink. Security checked it. No explosives. No chemicals. No threat. Inside, a single sentence. You should have died. Michael stared at the paper for a long time. Frank swore under his breath. We'll trace it. Michael folded the note carefully and placed it on the table. Some people don't know what life is. That night, he couldn't sleep. He walked the grounds, the moon pale above him, the grass cold under his bare feet. He thought of the children in the hospital, of their fragile hands, their small laughter, their stubborn courage. Someone wanted him afraid, but fear was not what he carried for them. The next morning, against advice, Michael called a meeting. I'm not canceling the benefit concert next month, he said. Frank stiffened. Michael, I won't let someone with hate decide my life. The room fell silent. Security argued. Doctors warned. Managers hesitated. Michael stood. I will not disappear. That evening, alone in the studio again, he wrote. Not music, words. If today were my last day, he wrote, I would want the world to know that love is stronger than fear, and that I chose love. He folded the page and placed it in a drawer. Outside, the city glowed. Somewhere, someone watched him. Somewhere, someone waited. But inside his chest, something steadier had formed. Resolve. He would walk into the light, no matter who stood in the shadows. The night of the benefit concert arrived under a sky that felt too calm for what Michael carried inside him. The stadium lights glowed against the darkness, enormous and beautiful, like a promise and a warning at the same time. Outside, thousands of fans were already gathered, their voices blending into a soft, restless ocean of sound. Inside the dressing room, Michael sat quietly, his head bowed, hands resting on his knees. The mirror reflected a man who had survived something he still didn't fully understand. Frank stood by the door. We're ready when you are. Michael nodded but didn't rise yet. He closed his eyes. The explosion returned. The flash, the roar, the heat, then dissolved into something else. The faces of the children he had visited, the girl who had smiled through pain, the boy who had squeezed his hand and whispered, Don't stop singing. He stood. As he walked toward the stage, the hallway seemed longer than usual. Every step echoed. Every breath felt loud in his ears. Security surrounded him. But for the first time since the incident, he did not feel small. The roar of the crowd hit him the moment he stepped into the light. Tens of thousands of voices surged upward, chanting his name. Michael, Michael, Michael. He paused at the edge of the stage. For a heartbeat, he considered turning back. Then he stepped forward. The lights blazed. The music began. The audience exploded into motion. And Michael Jackson became himself again. He sang with a fire that startled even the musicians. His voice cut through the night, clear and aching and powerful. Each note carried everything he had survived. Each movement felt deliberate, defiant. Halfway through the set, he stopped the band. The stadium fell silent. Michael stood alone at the microphone, chest rising and falling. I almost didn't come tonight, he said softly. A ripple of confusion moved through the crowd. But then I remembered something, he continued. Fear only wins when we let it decide our lives. And I refuse to let fear decide mine. The crowd erupted. He raised a hand for quiet. This show is for every child who is fighting something they don't understand, for everyone who has ever been afraid, and for anyone who believes that love is stronger than hate. He looked up at the stars. And I'm still here. The music returned. The night unfolded like a storm of sound and light. Michael danced harder than he had in months. Sweat soaked his shirt, but his movements were alive, electric, free. Backstage, Frank watched with his jaw tight. He's stronger than they know, he muttered. Near the end of the concert, during the final song, Michael moved to the edge of the stage and knelt. A single spotlight followed him. The crowd hushed. He placed his hand over his heart. "Thank you," he whispered. When the song ended, the stadium shook with applause. Michael left the stage trembling, from exhaustion, from emotion, from relief. In the hallway, he leaned against the wall, breathing hard. "You did it," Frank said quietly. Michael nodded. "We did." Later that night, as the stadium emptied and the world outside returned to its ordinary rhythm, Michael sat alone in his room, still in costume, staring at the reflection in the dark window. The explosion had not taken him. The fear had not owned him. Someone had wanted him silent. Instead, he had become louder, but he knew this was not the end. The shadow that had followed him since the gift still lingered, and soon it would step into the light. The call came just before dawn. Michael had barely slept. The concert still echoed in his mind. The roar of the crowd, the heat of the lights, the strange peace that followed. He sat at the small table in his hotel room when the phone rang. "Michael," Frank said. His voice was low. "They caught him." Michael closed his eyes. "Who?" "The man who planted the device in the gift box." Silence filled the room. "Where?" 3 blocks from the arena. Someone recognized him from the security footage. "Police picked him up an hour ago." Michael exhaled slowly. The world did not feel lighter, only clearer. Later that morning, Michael was taken to a quiet office inside the precinct. The suspect sat on the other side of the glass, hands cuffed, eyes hollow. He looked small now, ordinary, almost invisible. Michael studied him. This man had tried to turn a celebration into a grave. "Do you want to speak with him?" the detective asked. Michael thought for a long moment. "Yes." The room was silent, except for the hum of fluorescent lights. The man would not look at Michael at first. Then, slowly, his eyes lifted. "Why?" Michael asked. The man swallowed. "Because you represent everything I lost. Everything I never had. I wanted you to feel my pain." Michael nodded. "I do feel pain," he said softly, "but I didn't let it make me destroy." The man's shoulders sagged. When Michael left the station, the sun was already high. He felt older, wiser, strangely calm. That afternoon, Michael returned to the hospital where the burned boy was recovering. The child was propped against pillows, wrapped in bandages, but smiling. "You came back," the boy whispered. "I promised," Michael said. They watched cartoons. Michael made up stories. The boy laughed until his chest hurt. Before leaving, Michael leaned close. "Remember something," he said. "Even when terrible things happen, they don't get to decide who you become." The boy nodded solemnly. Months later, the trial ended. The world moved on. Headlines faded. But something had shifted inside Michael. He became quieter, more focused, more deliberate about where he went, who he trusted, how he spent his time. He wrote new music, not for charts, not for fame, but for healing. One night, alone at the piano, Michael whispered to the empty room. "They tried to silence me, but they gave me a voice I never had before." He pressed the keys. The melody was gentle, strong, alive, because what survives the fire is the truth of who you choose to be.